Hello everyone, Zellerant here, and it has been announced that Daiyan will be our next unit coming up for Girls Frontline 2. She is the one that was predicted to be coming up next, and we just learned that, and sorry, my cat kind of jumped up on me here as I was starting, but she's the one that had been predicted through the people who had kind of looked into the future that had kind of leaked it. So we can kind of trust those numbers a little bit better now on who we think's coming up, just based on the fact that they've now gotten 2 in a row correct. So we go ahead and take a look at her kit here. One thing that you'll know is she has been one that I've said, and you'll see other people say is a very easy skip. There's some reasons for that. Now, I will be personally getting her, and I think she's going to be a great unit for specific tasks. But those specific tasks are beatable without needing her. Especially now, because a lot of the content that required it is the permanent content. It was really good on the CN side because they got her so early to help with it, but a lot of people, I think, especially in my shoes, have already started to beat it, and that is because she has such a high mobility. So if you look at her pros and cons, our biggest pro is that she can get up to 16 tiles of movement with her common key, giving her a lot, but that makes it where she can easily capture those designated points. So like when you had to grab a point and then defend it, she can get in there and get out very easily with her extra movement that she has in her kit. And then she has, and we can look at the other pros and cons here after we go through her kit, because we'll kind of discuss them as we're doing it. The biggest thing that's about her is this calibration, is that she increases her crit by 3% and crit damage by 3% by each stack of calibration, and this can be stacked up to 10 times, and then after attacking, she can get 6 tiles of extra movement. And so that's why she's really good at capturing stuff, because she can get in and get out, so she can get herself the safety after she grabs it, because usually those spots are exposed. Now the big thing with this calibration is there's 2 variations of it. It doesn't mention it up here, but there's a temporary one that she'll get all this buff, and then as soon as she has an action, she'll remove those stacks, but then she can accumulate what's called permanent calibration, and the permanent calibration is on her and it's there for good. She's one of those people, one of those units that can ramp up her skills really quickly, or ramp up this calibration really quickly, and then once it's ramped up, she is good to go. The big negative on that is it takes her some time to ramp up, unless you start to get her dupes, and that's why she's actually a really good unit if you actually start getting a lot of dupes on her, because she can ramp up those permanent calibration stacks really quickly. So let's actually take a look at the kit to see that. Let's go down. We'll take a first look at her passive here. And so with her passive, Swift Harmony, this one is at the start of action, increases contamination gauge by 1 point or skill points, and gains 1 layer calibration. So at the beginning of her turn, she always gets that 1 skill point for using the skills. That's good. And then 1 stack of calibration. So she's always going to have at least a 3% plus crit rate and crit damage, just because of the start of the turn. When attacking targets under the protection of cover, increases contamination, or not under protection of cover, increases contamination gauge by 1 point. She has high mobility, so that's one of the big positives. She can get behind him and hit him in the back very easily, and that's what you're generally going to be wanting to do every turn if possible, because after you hit them, she can then use her extra movement to get back, get away and get herself back under cover after she hits them. So that's going to get her 2. So she should be able to easily get 2 skill points per turn just from that part. And when there are more than 2 calibration stacks before receiving a single target damage from enemies within range, she activates ambush against the enemy. So this is a counterattack basically against them, dealing physical damage equivalent to 150% attack and 4 stability damage, and gains 1 layer of permanent calibration. And so that is the stat that where it's a calibration stack, but it is permanent, and that can only be triggered once per turn. And then when she has more than 3 calibration stacks, increases damage by 20%. And so once she'll easily get that once she gets these permanent calibration stacks up above that 3, and then she just basically has that 20% permanently. Now, when you look at the dupes for the passive, you can kind of start seeing where the dupes are really big on her. So if you get 4 dupes of her, when there are more than 5 calibration stacks, increase a damage dealt by 40% instead. So now it goes from that 20 to 40% if you have 5 calibration stacks. Now it's already really slow to ramp it up, just so you know, but that doesn't change anything there. But then it also And ambush deals physical damage equivalent to 180% attack and 6% or 6 stability damage. So a nice big upgrade to the damage as well as stability damage here. But that's just Force not really making it easier to get those calibration stacks, just that it makes it better as she has more of them. Now the fifth one here is kind of another big upgrade. There is when the number of permanent calibration layers reaches maximum, ignores 15% of damage protection from cover. So now on the fifth one, if she has her max stacks, she ignores the protection from cover that the enemies have. Now you'll see in her other dupes that they're going to make it easier for her to get those permanent calibration stacks. This is just the upgrades that make it where they are better. So now the next thing we'll take a look at will be her skills. First we'll look at the basic attack. Nothing crazy in this one, it's just like everyone else. 80% attack within a 6 tile radius with your stability damage of 1. Nothing crazy there. We have the first skill here, Absolute Tuning. So this one is a skill single target dispel. It costs 1 contamination gauge skill point. It has no cooldown, stability damage of 2. As you know, you're already getting a skill point every turn, so this is something you could spam if you wanted to. Select an enemy target within a 6 tile radius, dispels 1 buff, and deals physical damage to 150% attack to it. And so this is basically almost her basic attack, because she's always going to have that skill point that she gets every turn. So I don't see personally why you would use basic attack ever when you could just use this bigger hit and it dispels a buff. And this one, if you get her first dupe, if the target does not have any buffs to dispel, she'll get another layer of calibration when attacking. So if they have no buffs, this is a nice way to get but it's not permanent. This is her, this is the normal one, because there is one of her skills will remove those temporary ones. So this gets 1 layer of it on that one if you have her first dupe. And then if you go to her second skill here, and it's a buff, the Shang Harmony, she'll gain 3 layers of calibration, gains tuning for 1 turn, and gain 1 extra effective command. So this is just a skill that's going to give her immediately 3 layers of calibration. And if we look up here, that tuning is deals stability damage equivalent to the number of calibration stacks before attacking. This can only be activated once and cannot be dispelled. So this is going to be a nice little skill to do. She can do a lot of stability damage with that. That on top of some of her other stuff can make it where she can do big stability damage. And with her ambush, she can run this, and then the enemy's going to attack her, and then she's going to counter, and that's going to count as using that tuning stack. So that's really good there. But then you look at her second dupe here, increases calibration layers gained by 3. So now you're getting 6. And remember, this can stack up to 10 times. And so taking it up to 6, if you know, that's the 3% of crit rate and crit damage. So that's pretty huge there. But then we get down to her ultimate, and this is where you can really see what those calibration stacks are used for here. So, and I forgot to mention up here, this one has a 4 skill point cost here. So this one you're not going to be able to spam. This one's you're going to do every so often once you get that enough skill points on her. And then on her ultimate, it's a single target buff, a stability damage of 2, a large cooldown of 6, but no skill point cost on this one. Selects an enemy target within 6 tile radius and deals physical damage equal to 190% attack to them. For each layer of calibration that she has, reduces the cooldown of this skill by 1 turn. And so that's where, you have 6 of them. Her cooldown can be reduced quite quickly as long as you have a bunch of stacks of calibration. And then after attacking with her ultimate, though, consumes all of those calibration stacks and then gains 1 layer of permanent calibration, which can be stacked up to 3 times. So right now, permanent calibration, in this, you can get 3 stacks of it. And if you remember, there's a part where you're wanting to try to max it out. But, so this is something you're going to want to try and spam, but you're not going to be able to unless you can get those calibration stacks really quickly. It does big damage, but to enable it to reduce the cooldown, you got to stack up those calibration stacks quickly, which the only one that really does it currently is this one right here. She has a little bit she can get in other places, but it takes quite a bit of time. You need at least, I'd say, 4 to 6 stacks, depending on how quickly you want to spam the ultimate, because it has a cooldown of 6 turns. Now, this is where her biggest upgrades on her dupes is the 3rd and 6th here, you'll see. Increases the maximum layers of permanent calibration by 3, so now it's up to 6. And so right now you can have, so 6, that's 18% basically that you can get of crit rate and crit damage. And then the 6th dupe, for every enemy kills, she gains 1 layer of permanent calibration. And she's going to be able to kill enemies very quickly with her ability to move around the map. And so this is where it's helping her ramp up. And as you can see, you have a quick way to get calibration stack here, the permanent calibrations you get here, and you're able to reduce this cooldown quite quickly, especially if you get all the dupes. Now you'll see that kind of how they mentioned up in the pros and cons. So if you really want to fully utilize her, she is one that wants her V3 and V6, and that's kind of her con, because there's other units that have significantly better dupes, Cluke being the biggest one that people note about. Now when we take a look at her keys here, so this is going to have some help for her as well in that capacity. Fixed key 1, when Daiyan has calibration, increases movement speed by 1 tile. So she's always going to have calibration pretty much. So she's always going to pretty much have that if you pick that one. At the start of battle, increases the contamination gauge by 3 points. So just getting her right off the bat with enough points to cast that skill that can give her immediate calibration. So that one's good right there. And for fixed key 3 here, for every extra movement point when attacking, increase crit by 10%. Note, every extra refers to additional movement points gained from buffs like movement increase. So she can get her crit increased by 10% just from that. So that's nice there. And then at fixed key 4, if Daiyan's movement speed is higher than targets, gain 1 layer of calibration for attacking. So this one's going to be a big one. She's going to have a higher speed than them, like all of them. She has a massive speed. So this is just a way, you're going to probably want this one on all the time just so she can get calibration much quicker. Then you have fixed key 5, absolute tuning. For each 3 layers of calibration, dispels 1 additional buff. So this one's going to be a very good one for making her a debuffer, because as you get layers of calibration, the only way you actually lose them is by using your ultimate. So you may have a case where you just don't use your ultimate and you just use her as a straight debuffer depending on the boss, because then you can stack them up kind of quickly and then just have this on there to just remove buffs quickly. Then you have fixed key 6, Quanshine Harmony. After this skill is used, if Daiyan kills an enemy in the same turn, restores HP and max HP, or equivalent to 20% of her max HP, and it's to 2 stability points. So just a nice way to kind of heal herself, although not absolutely necessary. I mean, you're generally going to have someone that can already do that for her in your team, so not needed there. Then you have her affinity key. When you get her up, just attack, HP, and crit damage. So nothing crazy on that one. You see that with a lot of the units. Common key, her common key though is a crit plus 5%. That's really nice there. And then at the start of action, gains movement increase for 1 over 1 turn. And this has a cooldown of 1 turn. So I believe this is a really nice key to have just in general. Is this is basically every other turn you're getting a movement increase 1 for 1 turn, which gives you an additional movement. Most units could take advantage of that, and then having a crit rate stat buff there is really nice as well. So let you take a look at her overall with her gun here. So her signature weapon that she has. So this one has, at the start of action, if the user has full HP, it gains 1 random buff for 1 turn. And she uses the assault rifle. But so 1 random buff if they have full HP, which will be pretty easy to keep up with a Suomi and her shields. Before attacking, there is a 20% to 100% chance of dispelling 1 buff from the target. This, to me, is a big negative of it. It's very RNG based unless you get 5 dupes of it. And this is definitely not a gun that I'm going for 5 dupes on. I'm not going to probably go over that on any limited weapons. So that one kind of sucks of just having a 20% chance if you get 1 copy of it for just dispelling 1 buff. And then for every 3, or if you get 5 dupes, 1 tile's move increases damage by 5 to 10%, up to 10 to 20%. And so this one's not as negative because you can have a lot of movement with her. It's very easy to get that 3 twice because it basically can be double, which can then give you a 10% damage increase, and then increases crit damage by 10, or if you have 5 dupes, 20% against enemies under protection of cover. And then her skill, if you have it on her specifically, increases damage dealt toward PMC units by 2.5%. So to me, not my favorite weapon, because one of the big things on it only has a 20% chance, and you have to get 5 dupes if you want to raise it up to 100% chance. This one's kind of a more reliant on dupe weapon, so I think the dupe itself, or the weapon itself, is an easy skip. Something like Planeta, if you get that, which is one of the standard weapons, is going to be plenty good on her, so no need for that, in my opinion. So we can kind of look at the rest of the pros and cons here based off what we know. Her skill 2 is ultimate at max permanent calibration stacks, resets ultimate cooldown. So basically what they're saying here is once you have your max permanent calibration stacks, you can run this skill and then immediately do, so you can alternate between skill 2 and ultimate, skill 2 and ultimate. And so that's really nice about that. She can constantly spam her ultimate, but that's once her permanent stacks are maxed out. And then tuning allows her to deal massive damage to stability despite not being able to deal elemental damage. And that's one of her big keys, is she's big on dealing stability damage, not as well as being able to get behind the enemies and hitting them from the back and then getting back under cover. And then has ambush that gives her that permanent calibration. And then ambush can also trigger support attacks from units like QJ. So if she ambushes on the enemy's turn, QJ is going to counterattack as well if she still has an attack. But her cons, like we already said, she doesn't have an element, so she doesn't deal elemental damage and can't do elemental debuffs. So she's kind of just, you can put it in any team, but she's not going to be synergetic with any specific elemental team, unless they eventually make like a physical specific team. And then it takes a while for her calibration and permanent stacks to get up. So, like this says here, she's going to be for your longer fights. Now, we do have those fights. If you know, we have like the boss at the end of the one mode, and that boss he has a crap ton of damage, so you're going to be hitting on him for quite a while. And you have, I believe it's 15 turns that you're hitting on him. So she's going to be able to max those out, and then she's going to be ramping up her damage there. Only negative is it's just a boss. You're not having to get around and hit any other little small mobs generally. There's a couple here and there, but nothing crazy with that. But she can eventually max out those stacks with that boss, making her do a decent amount of damage. And then as per usual with Vanguard, she's squishy and easily flanked by enemies. So having that extra 6 tiles of movement is kind of key on her, because she gets behind the enemies, attacks them, and then can retake cover. But it is kind of a negative because she can die quickly. So even though you're putting her out there, you're putting her in harm's way, especially if she's out in front of all the rest of your units. And then several of her dupe upgrades are disgusting, or saying basically really good. With V2 upgrade, skill 2 ultimate resets ultimate cooldown. With a V3 upgrade, ultimate has a 0 cooldown if permanent calibration stacked. And then with V6 upgrade, she gains permanent calibration at a fast rate. The big one is right here. Ultimate has a 0 cooldown with a V3. And I think V3 is like the big one if you really wanted to min-max her, is once you get those permanent stacks, because it raised the cap, she now can just spam her ultimate because she always has enough to reset the cooldown at all times, the permanent calibration stacks. So overall, a great unit on getting movement around and hitting the enemies in the back. But her downfall is the fact that she doesn't have an element, and that she is fairly dupe reliant because she takes a long time to spin up without them. But I know I'll personally be pulling for her, but I think for a majority of people, she's going to be an easier skip in terms of meta if you're looking to get the best of the best units. Now, this is not one of those games you have to worry about that too much. So she does have a really, really good skin that I haven't shown yet. I'll kind of, once they announce that kind of stuff, I'll do another video on that. But she does have a really nice skin that I know a lot of people like just for the skin alone. And she's not exactly going to be worthless to you. You're going to have her value that you bring out of her in combat. And then she does have, I think, a really good common key. So you're going to get value out of that too. But then again, if you just like her, she's going to be a good unit to pick up. You're going to get to be able to use her. It's not like she's useless in any way. I don't think any of the units in this game are. Just from a meta standpoint, there are better units that you can save up for, especially if you're kind of looking for getting dupes, since she is dupe reliant. But that is pretty much it on Daiyan. Definitely a cool unit, unique build with her. Because I don't think we really have too many other units in this capacity. I mean, Tololo kind of similar in the fact that she can get her the extra turn, which gives her basically the extra movement kind of stuff within her kit. And now with Springfield, which we'll get in the future, she's pretty much always going to get 2 turns and potentially a 3 on her first turn with Springfield, which actually makes her have more mobility than Daiyan, but that's way out in the future. So she's going to beat her in that capacity right now, pretty much for the long shot. So, but yeah, that is a Daiyan. Great unit. Looking forward to pulling for her when she comes out. But yeah, if you like my content, if you could like, comment, subscribe, it really helps. And thanks for watching.